So you've been advertising, and you know that there's a lot of new options available in the world of marketing and advertising and media, but you're not quite sure. How do you know how much money to budget? How do you know where to advertise with all of these new channels available online and digital and mobile, Google? Well, stick around and we're going to help you with that by telling you how you can go about making a media plan for your business. Let's play Main Street Marketing Challenge. So Main Street Marketing Challenge pinpoints the marketing goals of businesses just like yours and suggests solutions so that you can better navigate, as I said, the very changing and shifting landscape of media and advertising. And I'm Bruce Apar, and this is my business partner, Bruce Mishkin, and we are Pinpoint Marketing and Design, which is a marketing agency. So Bruce, let's talk about a media plan. As you heard, because you're sitting right next to me, and as we know, because of what we do, there are more and more opportunities, let's say. You know,
Right.
And there's this phrase that I used actually yesterday in that meeting we had with a client, you know, the paradox of choice, which is what businesses face these
Right.
days. There's a lot of great opportunities, but
Right.
how do you know what the right one is?
Right, right. Well, there are a lot of choices, and we were talking earlier about how a lot of businesses are approached by people selling advertising.
Right. They get calls, or maybe
They get calls.
a knock at the door.
Walk-ins to,
Right.
you know, if it's a retail store, somebody could walk in. Now, think about, you know, a market that you're in. You might have 10 radio stations, a whole bunch of suburban newspapers that cover various neighborhoods. Let's say that
Right.
you have 10 towns within, let's say, a 15, 20-minute drive of where you are, and there's one company that owns all these different newspapers, one that serves each town.
Newspaper chain.
There are people that are selling advertising on placemats in restaurants,
Yeah.
on cash register tape.
Right.
There are cable television, the cable TV operators,
Another shopping carts, right?
shopping carts,
Yeah.
outdoor advertising.
And also, I mean, this is not a joke. You know, restrooms, right? You can. I've seen them in
Restrooms.
restrooms.
I mean, it's you know, it's almost like any place you can print on, you can advertise.
And any place where people maybe are gazing for more than a few seconds at a time.
Right.
Billboards.
Right,
obviously.
like outdoor advertising. And there's TV, there's radio, and in the last, 15 years, and it's really has started to mature now, is digital advertising.
Right.
Okay, online advertising, where you can advertise on websites.
Right.
On individual websites. You can advertise on Google or Bing. There are these ad networks that you give them a budget and they allocate your advertising dollars all over the place, whether it's locally or nationally. They put your ads on, theoretically, thousands of different websites. So you're faced as a business person with, how am I going to spend?
Yeah.
I know I need to spend money. My competition is advertising. What do I do and where do I spend it? Do I do exactly what my competitor is taking out full page ads in such and such newspaper? Does that mean that I have to?
Right. And you know something, Bruce? Let's also start at a very good place to start, to quote Rodgers and Hammerstein,
Right.
Which is, there are benchmarks, right? Certain benchmarks for what percentage of your revenue you should allocate to
Right.
advertising.
Right.
So.
But it's all over the map. For
Right.
instance,
There's no one
there is no
rule
one,
of thumb.
There is no one, and I'm not going to claim to be an expert on, depending on what business you're in, this is how much money you should spend on advertising. But For instance, let's take the movie business.
Okay.
The movie business, they spend usually half
Right.
half
Half
the
of the
movie's
budget on marketing.
On marketing.
Right.
So it's $100 million movie, and very
Right.
often just as much.
Right.
So, for instance, let's say it's a movie that costs $100 million to make. They will spend $50 million on advertising.
Right. Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Whereas in some businesses, whether it's consumer packaged goods, it might be 4% or
Right.
7% of your expected revenue for the year.
Right.
So let's say that you expect to do $1 million. Your goal is to make $1 million. What are you going to have to spend to get there?
Right.
And then you have all of these options.
Right.
You have, again, the newspapers, the radio, local TV, but and then you have to create ads, whether they're TV ads or print ads or radio ads and
Right.
commercials and all of that, magazine. You have to create the ads. The
Right.
interesting thing, though, is that the cost of doing ads, of producing ads, is far less than the money that you're going to spend to place those
them.
ads.
Right. Yes. Well, and I don't want to get too far off track, so we'll come right back to this. But I just think it would be interesting for people watching, because of your and my long background in the movie industry, that the reason that they spend such a relatively inordinate amount on marketing compared to other businesses or industries is because in the movie business, everything hinges on the opening weekend.
Right.
So they have a very small window.
Right.
They're going up, let's say it's the summertime, they're going up against other potential blockbusters.
Right.
So everything is very concentrated and focused.
Right.
And of course, that's not the same in most businesses.
Right, right.
Yeah. Okay, so let's now go back after talking about that to what we're saying about how you need to make decisions on how much you want to spend
Right.
and then we get into the return on investment.
Right. So, if you have limited dollars to spend, very limited dollars
Right.
to spend, I would recommend doing very few media buys. In other words, let's say that you have a local newspaper.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And you have, let's say, $2,000 a month to spend, or
Right.
$500 or $5,000. That kind of budget, if you're in a fairly substantial market, is not going to take you very far.
Right.
So it's a good idea to heavy up in one or two media, or mediums, however you like to say it,
Right.
to heavy up there than to sprinkle your dollars in a lot of different places, because when you sprinkle your dollars, if you had $10,000 to spend,
Right.
are you better off spending that $10,000 in one place, or spending it in 50 places and spending 100 here and 50 there?
Right.
And usually the case is you're better off focusing your dollars in just a couple of places if your budget is limited, because you have to make impact.
Right, and also along the same lines, these are all the variables that we're used to dealing with over several decades, actually. So let's stick with the local newspaper example, because that's my more recent background with North County News in Westchester, and of course you'll get clients, advertisers, who'll say, "Should I take a half page for 1 week?" Or should I have smaller ads over the course of several weeks? It's the same idea, right? And we would, it's a case by case, response.
Right.
But generally speaking, we'd say you're better off with frequency, taking a smaller ad, right, in more issues.
In non-digital media, that is the case. In print,
Right.
TV, it was an old saying: repetition is the soul of advertising.
Right.
I urge you, unless you're advertising a going out of business sale,
Right. Liquidation.
don't take
A full
out
page.
just one ad.
Oh, right.
Okay? Don't do one ad, because there are people who will say to you, I'm not interested in advertising, I'm not interested in advertising, and an advertising salesperson from one of these media may say, well, then I'll be here for the ad you're going to place for your going out of business sale. Okay?
Right.
So otherwise, you have to realize in print that if you're in a newspaper or a magazine, Not everybody who's reading
Right.
that
It's going to
weekly
see
or
that.
monthly
It's going to
issue,
see that issue. Right.
it's not really that, is ready to buy what you're
Oh, okay.
selling
All
that
right.
week.
Right. But okay, there is that. But then there is also not everybody who, whether they subscribe or pick it up on the street corner, are necessarily going to see that edition.
That's right.
Yeah.
But when you buy advertising, you're paying for who sees your medium, not who doesn't.
Right.
Okay? So that's sort of irrelevant because
Right.
If you reach 100,000 people, then you reach 100,000 people
Right.
who get it by subscription every
Right.
week. But the real point and the reason for frequency in advertising is that people enter and leave the buying cycle
Right.
at different times. Let's say that you are a home contractor
Okay.
and you do roofing and siding.
Right.
Well, of the people who are reading the newspaper you're advertising in, what percentage need a new roof or new siding this week? 1%?
Right. Right.
2%?
Right.
10%? So why should I advertise in a newspaper
Right.
where 90% or 95% of the people who see my ad have no interest in what I'm
At
selling?
that moment. Right.
At that moment.
Right.
And the reason to advertise is because there are people who are interested, who are in the market, and over the course of a year,
Yes,
you're going
right.
to capture people who enter and leave the buying cycle. And the worst thing you can do is not be there when that individual
Right.
is ready.
So in a phrase, it's top of mind. You want to be top of mind, right?
Yeah.
And then that also starts to bleed over, you might say, into brand recognition.
Well,
right?
brand recognition is so important.
It's all important, yes.
Brand recognition and branding, how people perceive your brand, how they feel about your brand, what they believe your brand stands for.
Right.
That company, or they're really, you can give an image, for instance,
Right.
through your branding that your products are very expensive.
Right, and that's why, by the way, marketing has become more exciting than ever and more dynamic, right, than ever. And so there's this new discipline, you might say, or at least a new manifestation called reputation management, right? That's
Right.
because of the internet, where your reputation can spin out of control based on people saying negative things about you.
Right, reviews
Right.
online,
Right.
and we can address online, I think,
Yes.
separately.
Okay,
because
so let's go back,
you do
yes.
have, you do have these established media, especially if you're a business serving a 15-mile area. You could be a podiatrist, you could be a shoe store,
Right.
you could be a hair salon.
Right.
A plumbing contractor. It doesn't matter. Your dollars are probably well spent in a local newspaper that reaches homeowners,
Right.
that get haircuts, that have problems with their house that have to be repaired.
Right.
So there are many different scenarios, but you should be in there every week, every other week. Let's say it's a weekly newspaper. You should be in there because you never know when somebody, again, is going to be ready to buy. The other thing, too, is through the repetitive advertising, assuming that your advertising is quality advertising, that it doesn't look bad.
Right.
We've talked in other episodes, like a bad website or an amateurish website will make people think you're an amateur.
Or,
If you have a-
as we say, could chase customers away,
Right,
actually.
right.
Yeah.
And a bad ad, an ad that is just not effective or doesn't look professional.
Right.
Again, the person will, I don't know about that.
Without necessarily knowing. That's sort of the subliminal,
Right.
psychological aspect of advertising.
Right,
Yeah.
right. But just like in every medium, you want people to like you.
Yeah.
You want them to feel good about your business. So it's really important that before you advertise, before you do your plan, if you have an idea of what kind of advertising, we want to do print advertising, you want to do online advertising, make sure that your ad is done by, or work with a professional if you can. And I would say, don't work with the newspaper and let them do your ad. Better to hire a graphic designer or a small ad agency,
Right.
who's not going to charge you a lot of money.
And why would you, I think it's important that we amplify that a little bit. Why would you advise not to let the
The publication.
medium, right,
Yeah.
create the ad?
Yeah. The reason is because they're going to do it in the most expedient, quickest, cheapest way possible. They're producing a lot of ads for their advertisers, the local buy right liquor store, whoever it might be, and they're putting all the products in. They don't have a large selection of fonts. They cannot scale a logo to make it bigger. So for instance, if they shoot the logo on your business card and it's got to be bigger in your ad,
Right.
it'll be all grainy and out
Blurry,
of focus.
right.
It'll just look terrible.
Right.
So work with a professional to get that done. That's going to be a relatively small part of your spending. Again, you might be able to get an ad done for $250 or $500, a nice ad.
And people should understand and appreciate that that amount is the upfront amount, but in effect, if you're running the ad multiple times, you're amortizing the production cost over.
That's right.
Right.
And again,
It's not like you're paying the production cost every time you run the ad.
Right.
You pay it one time.
Right. And again, the media cost, aggregately, and even maybe the first time you do that ad, is going to be greater than the cost of producing that ad.
Right.
So, invest a little money, talk to some people, find out if there's a small marketing firm. Agencies want to help your business succeed because they would like you as a client for the long term.
Right.
Now,
there's something else I want to touch on. As the best salesperson I know, named Bruce. No, as the best salesperson I know, named anything. I remember well in all the years and all the different places we've worked together. You would have clients that would ask you. I mean, you're selling for one publication,
right?
So we're working at a publication, and let's call the publication Bruce. Okay. And so that's where your bread is buttered, so to speak.
Right.
But then you'd have clients, I remember, asking you, Bruce, I need you to do a media plan for me, right? So,
Right.
so what I'm trying to get at here is part of our explaining media plans to the audience is it has a lot to do with relationships and who you're dealing with and how much they can help you.
Right.
So, what happens with a salesperson? Are they supposed to recommend competing media to a client?
Well, you can really break the media plan up into two categories. There's the media plan for just the one magazine or newspaper
That you work for.
Okay,
Right.
And so I might go to them and say, I would suggest, based on what you're advertising, that you do this ad promoting this product every other week for the next 26 weeks.
Right.
Okay, so that's one scenario. Another, and so you help the advertiser.
Right.
Write the plan.
Right.
And obviously, you want to get as much as you can for yourself.
Yes.
When the advertiser is asking for advice, if the advertiser is asking a media rep
Right.
for advice, then I would say make sure you got yourself taken care of first. Okay.
Right.
And then I would be very honest with them because you want to help them. You want them to trust you.
Right.
You're not gonna, you're not gonna badmouth a competitor.
Right.
You may say, I really don't think that's where your money is best spent.
Right.
Or you could say, I think you're really better off doing 3 ads with us than 1 ad one time in 3 different places.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
If you really believe it and you really believe that's true. If you believe that your customer will benefit by the broader exposure, then you recommend that.
Right.
And it doesn't just have to be print, it can be any medium. Outdoor,
Right.
any medium.
Right.
Outdoor, which is now called out-of-home advertising.
Yes, right.
It's not
OOH. Right.
OOH.
Ooh.
Yeah, ooh.
Ooh.
Ooh, I see a billboard. And billboards, by the way, in the industry are known as bulletins. People who are in the
are
out-of-home
they? I
advertising
didn't know that.
industry
Really?
call billboards
Bulletins. Yeah. Trade jargon.
Trade
Yeah.
jargon. There's
Yeah.
trade jargon in
Everything, yeah.
every business.
Yep.
So I would have no problem recommending but again, it comes down to you don't want to water down your media buys.
Right.
This is not about, oh, well, this paper serves my community, so I want to support them. This isn't about supporting a publication.
Right.
This is about supporting you. And if
Right.
it makes business sense to be in there, then be in there.
Right.
But don't spread your dollars so thin that you're going to have a tiny ad.
Right.
Everywhere you look,
Right.
you're going to have a little ad. It's better, and it's better to, look at the research, talk to other businesses. Okay,
Right.
if it's again a local newspaper,
Right.
call up some of the businesses that are advertising newspaper that are non-competitive to yours.
Right.
You don't want to call a competitor of yours because they're going to say it stinks, even
Right.
if it's good, because they don't want you
Right.
to compete against them in advertising in the newspaper.
Right.
So, but talk to non-competitive advertisers and say exactly what you're planning.
Right.
So and so is presented plan. Just wondering how advertising in such and such weekly works for you.
Right.
Okay.
But then also, from, let's call it the reverse point of view, by which I mean the target audience, but the individual really, the consumer. In terms of consumer behavior, right, the complement to what we're saying, or the converse to what we're saying, is that the way advertising really works is people don't necessarily make a decision based on seeing one ad in one place. They
Right.
make a decision based on multiple impressions
Right.
over the course of, like you talked about, the buying cycle.
Right.
Multiple impressions on them
Right.
over the course of time in various places. So
Right.
that's why it's important. It's not just about digital or print.
Right.
It's and, not or. It's and.
I think that we also should state flat out that while most of the work that we do these days is in the digital arena,
Right.
is online advertising and marketing and all of that.
Right.
I don't believe that you should just forget about everything that's out there. There's a lot of viability to established media like newspapers and a penny saver type of publication. They
Right.
all have their value. But I think the most important thing is if you can measure the results of your advertising, and this is where digital has it over print.
Print, right.
Okay.
Which
even-
is analog, right?
Which
If
is
you wanna
analog,
give it-
but
right.
over print and even
Yeah.
over TV and radio,
Right.
there are measures by which you can see how your advertising is working for you. Now, I'll give you an example. Let's say you advertise in three different local newspapers. They're the publishers of these local newspapers. And you also advertise in a magazine that covers your entire county.
Right.
Okay?
Which is a monthly.
A monthly.
Right.
Okay? So, all you know is you place the ads in there, people aren't going to call you up and say, call your business or walk in the
Right.
door and say, I just saw your ad in such and such weekly and that's why I'm here.
Right.
They're just going to show up in your place of business.
Right, right.
Or if they call, they're just going to call.
So you're saying it's not that easy to track what works.
Well, it is easy if you go the extra measure and set up what are called, especially if you rely on inbound phone calls. People want to make a reservation. If you're a restaurant, if you're a hair cutter, they need to book an appointment. A doctor, a lawyer, all these people need to call up.
Right.
So if your business success is dependent on incoming phone calls and your ability to close the business when they do call,
Right.
so they don't say, oh, thank you very much, I'll get back to you if I need you. You get them on the phone, do everything you
Right.
can to get them into your place of business.
Right.
But what you can establish, and there are companies that can do this for you, is establish what are called tracking numbers.
Right.
Tracking phone numbers. So you can get different phone numbers for your ads in different media.
Right.
So if it's
Right.
555-1212 in this newspaper, your number is 555-1313, 555-1414, okay? And it's all, and these companies can, and your phone still rings. You're not really changing your phone number. You're just setting up, or these companies are setting up a tracking number, a tracking code
Right.
that
Right.
will be able to tell you, I got this many calls from here, and this many
Right.
calls from here,
From-
this many
yeah.
calls from here. And then, of course, it's not just the volume of calls, it's the return on investment.
Right.
You have to consider, for instance, if you're paying $5,000 to advertise in one place and $1,000 to advertise in another place, and you're getting the same amount, and you're getting 100 calls from each.
Right.
Well,
Something's wrong
that
with that.
doesn't mean that both magazines produced equal response, because you spent $5,000 to get the 100 calls here and only 1,000 to get the 100 calls here.
Right.
Put your money with the place that were $1,000.
It's more efficient.
Okay,
Yeah.
and this way you don't go on for weeks or months or years advertising in a place that isn't as effective as another medium could be, because you don't know. If you don't know where you're getting the results, then you're flying blind.
And we should also talk about, in the same context, how business owners might say, let's say it's a restaurant. So how do you know that the ad worked, or what kind of response? Well, I ask people when they come in where they saw it.
Right.
What's the problem with that? People don't accurately remember where they saw it.
Right.
So if I had this experience again with most recently North County News, where there's other newspapers, or even currently, because I write a column for newspapers. But what will happen, even on the editorial side, they'll say, I read something in your newspaper, and they'll start to say, oh, well, that wasn't in our newspaper.
Right.
It's the same thing with advertising.
Right.
They may say, I saw it in the New York Times, but they saw it in the Wall Street Journal.
Imagine this. Imagine a car dealer. You walk into a car dealership. It's a Toyota dealer. And they say, which ad brought you here, and what TV station were you watching at the time? What?
Or they do phone surveys like that, where they ask you.
Right.
Who can remember that?
The point, I did not buy an Almond Joy or Mounds bar because I saw a specific ad.
Right.
By the same token, when I see, on television advertising, if I see an ad for a new type of potato chip or some salty snack or what have you,
Right.
I don't get up and run out to the supermarket that minute.
Right.
The idea of that kind of advertising
Right.
is, and especially when it's done repetitively, is that when you're in the supermarket and see that product on a shelf, ding, ding, something's going to go off in your head, and your arm reaches for that product.
Right.
Okay? So that type of advertising is not like a direct response call to action. It's implanting in your brain the image, the delicious taste, the packaging, whatever it is. And they'll show you the packaging in a commercial or whatever, because when you're in the store, it's going to be that recognition. By the same token, a larger entity that's advertising will coordinate what they're doing to get that sale from you. So let's say it was Frito-Lay, and Frito-Lay is running a 13-week campaign to promote their new marshmallow jalapeno potato chips. Horrible, but let's say they're doing that. When you go into a store, if they're doing a pretty substantial media campaign, it's pretty likely that when you go to the supermarket, you may see a display for that product,
shelf talker,
or a shelf talker, but a standing display at the end of an aisle, or what's called a shelf talker, which is a little ad on the shelf that's talking to you. Right.
Yes.
So there are many factors that go into it.
Right. And so we come to the close of this particular episode, and I think next time, Bruce, maybe we can sort of extrapolate and talk more about digital advertising.
Absolutely.
So we've talked a lot about print today, and hopefully you've found it informative and very helpful as it pertains to your business. And then the next show we'll talk about more about digital advertising. And so, on behalf of Bruce Mishkin and myself, Bruce Apar, thanks for watching Main Street Marketing Challenge, and we'll see you next time. Thank you. That was good.